we will turn it over to Nicole.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy afternoon. So I am here today to talk a little bit about the newly revised forms that we have out on .com that went into effect in January. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicole Snyder, and I'm one of the managers of Member Account Services. And my team helps put together and reorganize and just design the forms that you guys see on a daily basis. So without further ado, here we go. So in January, we revised 3 forms. So the CB 533, which is our cash balance benefit program election form, our ES 372, the retirement system election form, lovingly known as the PERS-STRS election, and the ES 350, the permissive membership election form. So copies of these forms, the updated forms, should be provided in your packets. And they are also available on CalSTRS.com and on SO through the forms ordering pages, so they're already up. And then we just ask that you please discard any outdated forms that you may have sitting in your offices. We understand that you may have some forms that have already been filled out and completed by employees and yourselves on the old forms, and that's okay to go ahead and submit those as necessary. We just ask that moving forward you use the new forms. So we're going to dive right in. So the CB 533 is our cash balance benefit program election form. And this form is actually used to make a coverage election for creditable service performed for CB program employers. So in other words, employees who are working in a CB eligible position for a CB eligible employer. This election is applied per employer. So if you have an employee who is working multiple employers in multiple CB employers, the CB election that they make with you does not prohibit them from making a different type of election with another employer. So it's just specific to you as the CB employer. How many CB employers do I have in here today? Okay, enough. So the changes that we made to this form, actually, they're not really due to any legislative amendments. We just wanted to make some further clarifications on the form, but they do align with the amendments that we're looking forward to making in the membership election cleanup bill that Joycelyn was talking about earlier. Again, that bill is really meant to be technical. There's not a whole lot that is minor policy type in that particular proposal. So we're allowed to make the changes to the form now to align with what the law already allows us to do, considering that all we're asking for for the amendments that we want to make would just be to clarify what the current process is. So we just made an update to the design. We removed the employer demographic information. Now, I've heard from a couple of employers that that's a little bit of an issue on not just this form, but on some of the other forms, the 350 in particular, because you use that form in order to then take the information and plug it into our system when you're enrolling employees. We are actually in the process of moving towards taking the demographic information off the majority of the forms that we don't need the information on. It's an information security risk measure that we're going towards. So at this point, we understand that you have used these documents in the past for your purposes, but we'll at this point, we're not looking at putting the demographic information back on. If that is something that you need, please send an email to or you think that you need, send an email to your employer services representative, and they'll forward it to me, and we'll put it kind of in the hopper for when we look at the form again and any upcoming amendments we need to make or updates. And then we also clarified the employee election options. So we tried to make it really clear. So if you're already a DB member, you would make the selections that are available to you in Section 1A. If you're not, or if your employee is not already a DB member, then they would make whatever elections that are in Part 1B. The other piece to that is, like Joycelyn mentioned, also with our membership cleanup bill, trustee service is creditable only for CB employers. So we added on the form, there wasn't a spot for it before, so we added on the form where anybody who is performing trustee service for you as a CB employer and they wish to elect CB for that service, there's now a vehicle for them to do so. And then finally, we just updated the required signature and certification language and updated the instruction page as necessary. So any questions on that particular form? No? Great. So moving on to the ES372, our retirement system election. Again, this form is, just as a reminder, it's used to make a retirement system election coverage when a member of either CalSTRS or CalPERS takes a position that requires membership in another retirement system. So the key here is we want to make sure that the position that they're taking, that new position, requires membership in the other retirement system. So if you ever are unsure, you know, I know that CalSTRS, or I'm sorry, I am CalSTRS, that CalPERS feels the same way, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you guys make that determination. This election must be made within 60 days of the date of hire into that eligible position, and the election is applied per position. So meaning if they take a new position, if you have an employee who took one position, made this election, and then they later take a different position with you at the same employer, their eligibility for this election should be looked at, reevaluated at every new position, because they will have that right to make that election with every new position they take. So SB 1165, that was our housekeeping bill this last year, did actually make some amendments to Education Code 22509. That's the section dealing with the PERSTERS election. And it basically allowed for, we originally had put into law that CalSTRS must receive the form within 30 days of the election signature, but we had heard that that was a little bit tight for employers to be able to get the form to us in that time frame. So we extended the time frame to 60 days after the election signature date. And that change went into effect as of January 2019. So the changes that we made to the form, there actually isn't a lot of changes made to this particular form. We did update the CalPERS section, which is to reference the 120-day break in service requirement. This was actually their request that we added this in there. The 120-day break in service requirement was recently added to law as of 1/1/18, I believe, and it was due to Bill AB 590. If you guys have any questions on that bill or how it applies here, we suggest you contact CalPERS on that particular section. And then the only other change that we made to the form is actually just on the instructional page, and it's again updating that, that requirement for CalSTRS to receive the form from 30 days to 60 days. Otherwise, the form is the same. There we go. And then, so I just wanted to do a couple of reminders on the retirement system election form. You should only be providing this form to those employees who are eligible to make the election. So it's those employees who are either CalSTRS members taking a position that requires membership in another retirement system, or those CalPERS members who are taking a position that requires membership in CalSTRS DB. Again, if you're unsure, reach out and we'll be happy to help you make that determination. The election eligibility should be evaluated again with each new position the employee takes. And once the election is made, it applies to the credible service for that position. And then finally, we just ask that you do not submit the ES372 form to CalSTRS if your employee is electing to have their service reported to the system in which it actually defaults to. We know that it defaults here. We don't need a form to tell us that it should be reported to the actual retirement system that it defaults. We do understand that you guys want to use this though sometimes for your own purposes, just making sure that employer or employees know which system they're going to. So we can't stop you from giving the form, but we just say we don't need it, so you don't need to submit it to us. But it might be good to keep a copy for your own files. Yes, hold on, got a question.
Sheila Walker, Tama County Department of Ed. I thought we had to get this form and get it signed back because this was our proof that we provided them the election.
We don't need the proof that you provided the election. But
we need to get it completed for our files.
You So previously, we actually had two separate forms for that issue. So one was the election, and one was just the acknowledgement. So we merged them into one form. So understanding that you can use this for that, but you don't have to. So for instance, we have seen some employers where they, in their hiring packet, they have like a kind of a list of, oh, yep, we supplied you this, we supplied you that. Please sign that we actually did supply this for you, and that's for you guys to keep for your own records. We don't need to keep record of that in-house for like a member's entirety, for their files. But this is something where we would, if we had to ask you later on down the road for proof, this is where you would be able to then provide that to us. Does that help clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still need to complete it for us.
That's up to you if you want them to complete it for you. We're just saying that I'm saying that we don't need it for our purposes. Another question?
Right, but if you ask us later to whether we provided this form or not, we have to have something signed by them that yes, we did provide it.
So the question is,
that's what I'm getting at.
Yes, so the question was, just to repeat, was that if we do have to ask for it later on, that you as an employer have to provide something to us showing that you did actually provide information to your employee about their right to make this election. That is correct. It doesn't necessarily have to be this form though. So if you had something internal that was proving that this was something that we gave to this employee, we would take that as well. Any other questions? Okay. On to the one that I know you're all waiting for. The ES350 permissive membership form. So this form is used to make an election for an employee to make an election to become a CalSTRS defined benefit member. The election can be made at any time while someone is performing creditable service. And you as the employer must provide the membership information to the eligible employees within 30 days of the date of hire. And this election actually applies to all subsequent service. So the CB 533 was per employer, the 372 is per position, the 350 is basically all service. So across employers as well. So again, our technical housekeeping from last year made amendments to Education Code 22515. The first one is very similar to what we did with the ES350, or I'm sorry, 372, where the required days for CalSTRS to receive the form has moved from 30 to 60. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more breathing room. But the bigger piece to that amendment was actually in changing the effective date of the membership date. So previously we had added into law that the membership date would be the first day of the pay period following the election. And we changed it with SB 1165 to no earlier than the first day of the pay period in which the election is made. I'm going to go over this in a little bit because I know that there's a little bit of confusion on some of this. So, but I just want to let you know that these changes again were made effective as of 1/1/2019. So the changes that we made to the form are, the form never had an instruction page on it before, so we just created one and moved some of the pertinent information that was on the front of the form to the instruction page. Again, we removed the demographic information to be in line with our information security risk assessments. And then the biggest piece is that we clarified the election information and we allow the employee to select their membership date. We did add a little note at the bottom, and I'll talk about that on the next slide, that helps explain the membership date versus employment date. And then again, we just updated the required signature and certification language at the bottom for the employers. So let's talk a little bit about that footnote. So the footnote says that membership date may be no earlier than the first day of the pay period in which the election is made, which is what the law says, or the first day of employment, whichever is later. So really what we're trying to get at here is that the membership date cannot be prior to the date of employment. And when we say date of employment, we mean hire date. So for us, if somebody is not yet hired, they cannot make a membership election. So what that means here, there's a couple scenarios I wanted to go through. So if somebody's a substitute and they're hired on January 10th, and then they made the election, and the signature of the election is January 30th. But the first day that they perform service is actually in February. What would be the earliest membership date that this person could have? I am here mumbling. So it can be no earlier than 1/10. So it's the first date of employment or the date that they're hired. So the question you might be asking is, well, the law says that it could be as early as the first day of the month or the pay period in which the person makes the election. So why can't it be 1/1/2019? Again, we don't consider someone to have not been, they weren't hired on 1/1/19, they were hired on 1/10. So you can't have anything earlier than the date that they were considered to be hired. And I get it that in our law it says employed, and a lot of times employment to you as employers means the date that they start performing service. In this instance, we really mean the date that they are hired to perform service, not when they start performing service. So in this scenario, you would immediately enroll this person as a member with the elected date or the date that they elected, which could be no earlier than 1/10, and then you would start reporting the member service and contributions to us immediately. Does that make sense? Got a question?
So it says no earlier than 1/10.
Yes.
So in the employee section, they're picking the membership date.
Mm-hmm.
If they chose to, could they pick 1/30 or 1/20?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it have to be 1/10?
No, they can pick anything. They can pick 1/20, 1/15. That's at their discretion at this point because it's their election. But this is where they could not have anything earlier than the 1/10. So here's scenario number 2. It's slightly different, somewhat the same, but slightly different. So the substitute teacher, again, hired on 1/10. They first perform service, 2/20, and then they make their election in March, 3/15. What is the earliest date that this person could have as a membership date? Heard it? 3/1, because it's the first day of the pay period in which the election is made. So again, we're not looking at when they perform service. The dates that we're really looking at is the signature date of the election and then their hire date. So if you go back signature date, you go back to the first of the month in which they make that election. If they were already considered hired, you're good to go. So in this situation, you would actually have to set this person up as a non-member as of 1/10, because that's when they were hired. And you would have to report the non-member service, and then you would later enroll them as a member using the membership date that they provided on the form, but can't be any earlier than 3/1. And then you would start reporting the member service and contributions after that date. Okay. So some reminders on this particular form. Again, you should only be providing the ES-350 to those employees who are eligible to make this election. And according to our law, it's really those people who are hired to perform creditable service and those who are excluded from membership in CalSTRS defined benefit programs. So those are your substitutes, your part-time employees, right? If you have an employee who is already a DB member and they take one of these excluded positions, so a substitute or part-time, they are not eligible for this election. So you should not be giving them this form. You shouldn't be giving it to them, and we don't want to see to have a copy here as well, because they don't get the right to make this election. Their service already is required to be covered under their DB program. And then again, once all subsequent creditable service performed for all employers is now subject to DB coverage once this election is made. Again, if the individual is currently working for multiple employers, if they permissively elect with one, it means that they are now mandatorily qualified for all the employers moving forward. But this does not preclude anybody who makes this election from making an election later on down the line that they are now eligible for. So again, if they go work for a CB employer and they take a position that is covered under CB service, they can elect CB for that coverage as well, or for that service. And then finally, we ask that you don't submit the ES-350 form to us if your employee is declining membership. Again, they're already excluded from membership with CalSTRS. We don't need to see the form that says that they're declining it. This kind of goes along with the same idea of, we get that you guys will probably use it, to make sure that they know that they're declining and you can keep it for your records. And if we ever need it, we'll reach out to you, but we don't need the form to come in-house. Okay. So some references, the employer directive that just recently went out, the enrollment in CalSTRS benefit program, 2018-04. I hope that's been really helpful for you guys. We know it's big, but it's really meant to help understand when to use these forms, when to enroll people your employees in whichever program that they're eligible to be enrolled in. We've had some recent articles in the Employer Connect newsletter that went out regarding at least the ES350. And then if you ever have any questions, you can always contact your employer services representatives by either calling or emailing employer help. And with that, are there any questions? Oh.
Hi, Renee Lamb from Napa. So on the ES372 form,
Yes.
it's based on position. So if you have a STRS member that's working a sub position that does not require membership, do they have the right to elect?
Yeah, at that point, you're saying that they're already a CalSTRS member taking a position that kind of doesn't require membership, but because they're already a DB member, any subsequent creditable service that a DB member works requires membership in CalSTRS. It has to come here. So that would be the caveat to that.
I was going to say that's not based on solely position then that the person is taking.
Correct. There's a couple more levels of review to take into consideration, and that is one of them. Oh, another question?
I just want to piggyback on that question, because would we, in every instance of a substitute assignment, need to do a form? We really depend on you as the employer to tell us that. We've had some employers tell us that they consider employees to be rehired every year or every semester. So we basically look to you to say, when do you consider them to be hired or rehired? And you would potentially need to supply them that election form each time you would consider them hired in a new position. Because I can imagine with a classified subpool, I mean, they could be doing any number of assignments, and the idea that we would need to track down a piece of, try and that just...
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way that we're interpreting the statute at this point, yeah. Anybody else?
Hi. When we have an employee who elects CalPERS, as a CalSTRS member, they have the right to elect CalPERS. CalPERS does not require the county office to sign off on the ES372.
Correct.
But the districts do provide that form to CalSTRS. We don't sign that form. So we have been told that we need to sign off on it before it goes to STRS, and then we've been told not to. Do we need to sign off on it before it goes to STRS?
That's a great question. So when you have a CalSTRS member who is taking a position that requires membership in CalPERS, and they're electing to have CalSTRS, so on the ES372, if it's the left side box, we, CalSTRS, require the district and the county to sign off. If it's a CalPERS member and they're taking a position that would require a member in CalSTRS and they're electing to have that service retained at PERS, on the left side of the 372 form, the CalPERS only requires the district or one, the county or the district, to sign off. So that's kind of the nuance there. We know it's a little bit different, but does that help clarify?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they just don't put anything on it when they send it to upload it into the PERS system. Right? They don't have to. That's what CalPERS states, is that we don't have to sign off on it. But then they take that copy and they provide it to STRS because they should. And my question is, when it gets to STRS, does it have to have a signature on it?
So in that point, no, because they're not electing CalSTRS. At that point, it's just a notification to CalSTRS, and we're actually working with CalPERS to potentially revamp the form altogether and even take that piece out of the legislation that says that each system should get a copy of it. Because usually, if we need to ask
what happened there, we can either get a copy from you or CalPERS as well. We work really closely together with them on that. So we're looking to stop some of the redundancy in that. You're welcome. Anything else? Oh, hi, Vina. Hold on one second. She's bringing you a microphone.
Hi, Veena from Orange County. This is, I know you just said you don't need the forms ES 350 or 372 and it has nothing to do with STRS, but it's really helpful if we send everything, because once you have your new system, we will upload these forms. We can see everything together, complete, then going through the files and all that. We have to then scan it, keep it somewhere.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. And, you know, I mean, I can't say that, you know, if you want to send them to us, you can.
So
we don't need them. And we're actually looking at changing our process to, well, I don't exactly know what we're going to do with them yet. If it's really if it's a form that we don't need to have in our system. So that's why we're kind of just saying goodness gracious. If it's something that we don't need at this time, we're asking you guys to not send it to us, partly because of with the new system coming on board, there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming in that you will have to report to us and report differently. So we're just looking to mitigate some of the paperwork ahead of time. Yeah.
The other, excuse me, the other reason why I think we would prefer not to receive them for members who have never been in our system, we don't have record of that person that you're sending us this form for, so we don't know what to do with them. So we will certify destruct them because we don't have any, we won't create a brand new member account in our system in order to tell ourselves they're not a member in our system. So that's the difficulty we have, and you as the employer would need to maintain it in your system of record as knowing that you have given them the option and they've selected PERS. We would never come looking for that unless the member was circling back to say, no, they actually elected STRS. So that at that point it would be, the onus would still be on you as the employer to prove that you had provided that. And we have no place to put it.
But not for ES 350 though.
That's correct.
So the ES 350, right, which would be a STRS member who then elected.
You're talking if they're a non-member and they're declining membership, because you still have to submit or create a non-member account. We do have an account on file with them. You are correct.
So we could accept those. We were never in any of this. We're not going to reject them back to you. For members that are not in our system, we would certify destruct them. And for the other members, non-members, we could put them in that non-member file. However, I would still want to stress to you that if any point this is in question, we would still look to you to provide that proof. If we had it, we have it. If we didn't, it would still be your responsibility to prove that you had made the offer. Does that help?
Is that helpful?
Not, but we have to.
Again, we won't reject them back to you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. And now we're going to do enrolling employees in non-binary gender. And we've got Gabriel.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabe Gandara, and I'm a trainer within Member Account Services. I'm happy to see you all again. November was way too long ago, right? Hey, Vina, how's it going? So I always like to start with thanking you, the employer, for being out there, working hard, being diligent, getting the member reporting right, so I can be up here speaking to you. So thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Today I just have a short little piece. Short little piece will be way less controversial than filling out 350 forms and 372s, okay? And I'm going to be talking about Senate Bill 179 and some changes in reporting that's going to happen for you today and going into the future. So Senate Bill 179, also known as the Gender Recognition Act, allowed a third option for California citizens when filling out official paperwork, such as birth certificates, driver's licenses, and state-issued ID cards. Now Californians have three options. They can pick female, male, or non-binary. So in order to keep up with the changes in the law, CalSTRS is having built into the new pension system that third option to report non-binary. In the meantime, CalSTRS has provided some avenues for you and the member that wish to make that non-binary designation in the meantime. Now, for new employees, we ask that you, the employer, contact us here at CalSTRS directly. And we're going to ask you to make note of a couple of things, please. First, please email your point of contact at employerhelp@calstrs.com. Please provide the employee's name and their client ID, and that they wish to make this designation. Second, whether reporting through the MR87 file or through REAP, please default the gender to female. So that way our actuaries can make conservative assumptions about these benefit payments. Because we all know the women outlive the men, right? It's true. On our end, CalSTRS will make an annotation so that when the new system goes live, we'll update that information for you. And there's nothing more that needs to be done. Now, for current employees, we ask that the member contacts us directly. And there are 3 ways they can go about doing that. They can send a secure message on mycalstrs.com, or on myCalSTRS, excuse me. They can do it the old-fashioned way and send us a letter to our P.O. box. Or if they want to find a nice in-between, they can call our customer service line, 800-228-5453, and let us know that they would like to make that designation. Again, we will annotate this, and when the new system goes live, we'll update that information for everybody, so there's no more work on your part. What questions can I answer at this point? Okay, I promise you this was going to be really short and really sweet. Oh, yes, ma'am, please, in the back.
So is this going to be the regular process after, just going forward, or later on down the road, if a current employee wants to change their gender, that there's going to be a different process?
In the new system, there will be that option to make the non-binary
So we'll be able to make
designation.
that change once we get that information. from
Correct.
the employee. Great, thanks.
Oh, let me clarify that here. Megan, would you mind jumping in?
Yeah, so in the new system, when you enroll a new employee, you'll be able to choose non-binary as an option. But if a current employee needs to update their gender, they need to contact CalSTRS.
Does that answer your question, ma'am? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Other questions I can answer? Okay, well, if you leave here today, you should come up with some more questions, you think of something, you have some scenarios you might want to run past your point of contact. Please do not hesitate to email employerhelp@calstrs.com, and your point of contact would be more than happy to talk to you about anything you wish. And with that, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabe. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to our FSB team to talk about AB 2052 and the implementation plan. And we've got David Munoz coming up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Munoz. I oversee the Treasury unit here at CalSTRS. Have a very short and sweet presentation for you today about different types of banking transactions and some legislation that was recently chaptered back in August of 2018. So I feel really lucky that I had the after lunch slot, because this is when you're all most engaged and alert. And so a topic like different types of banking transactions is probably just the right time for this. So just real quick before we get to, how do I flip through these? These right here? Okay. So just really quickly, Assembly Bill 2052, we're actually terming that now e-payment. So basically at the end of the day, and we'll get into some more details of this, but what AB 2052 did was it basically requires CalSTRS to receive contributions in a very particular specific format now. So currently, we can receive contributions from employer entities in just about every format, absent you bringing a duffel bag full of cash to the front door. So, and even if you did that, we would probably accept it and take it to the bank, but I'm not advocating for that at all. So that's what we're talking about today. So here's the quick agenda. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about AB 2052. I'm going to describe the different payment formats that are currently available right now. I'll show you some metrics on the types of payments that we're receiving, and basically we can figure out who's impacted in this room. And then we'll talk about a very tentative implementation timeline as well. And then I'm going to try to save the last 5 minutes for any questions or comments that you have. And we have a couple other mediums or venues for you to give us any of your feedback regarding this implementation, because we definitely want to hear from you on how this is going to work at your particular employers. Before we go into the next slide, just to get sort of a pulse of the group, I'm curious, by a raise of hands, how many of you are already remitting payments to CalSTRS via some type of an ACH format? Okay, very good. By a raise of hands, how many were aware of Assembly Bill 2052 that recently was chaptered? A few of you. Okay, good. It's good. It's good to know. Let's go ahead and get started then. So AB 2052 at a glance, really there's three components. It was a very short and sweet bill. It did three things. First, it required CalSTRS to receive benefit payments in a very specific format, and that's automated clearinghouse transactions, either debit or credit, and we'll get into that in a moment. So that's the first piece. The second piece, before we can actually move to that very narrowed scope of collecting payments that way, the CalSTRS board has to actually take an action on this, so that even though the governor has signed this bill, it's not implemented yet because our board has to actually take the action to do it. That was the second piece. The final piece, if there was any sort of issue in which your employer could not move to an ACH format for whatever reason, there is a waiver policy, or a waiver, not a policy, a waiver program. So if you need a little bit extra time for us to help you get onto ACH, we can do that. So those will be the three components of the bill. There's a number of reasons why moving to the ACH format is really beneficial for employers. I would start out by saying that this is an industry standard. It's the industry best practice. Every bank moves money through this venue, which is an ACH transaction. It's been around for well over a decade. It's the cheapest and most secure format to move this kind of money in at this particular volume. Just getting into some of the benefits for you. Relative to sending us a check, there's a lot more security around using an electronic format such as ACH. Lower cost. So if your employers are actually writing checks, and we get a lot of checks, probably a third of all of our transactions are paper checks. You, your staff, your colleagues, or a lot of people are touching paper to actually get a contribution paid. When you use something like ACH, it's just like using, well, it's very similar to using online banking. You schedule a payment, you tell us how much, what you want it credited to, and when to send it. So it's a heck of a lot easier, cheaper, and safer than other formats of banking transactions. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So I want to give you just a little backdrop on the various types of payment formats that we're currently taking. So we've talked a lot about check, of course. You write a check, mail it to us. There's postage, processing, handling. A lot of folks on your side and a lot of folks on our side are handling these checks to make sure that when they come over that we're crediting A, to the right employer, B, it's going to the right pool, the right bucket of money, whether it be DB, CB, or some other payment. There's a lot of room for error in there, and I know that we've worked with you and some of your staff on correcting those. It's without fail, every single month there's a handful of transactions that don't get posted correctly, and that could definitely be avoided if we move to a electronic format. Direct deposit. So this is, I know it sounds obvious, but this is when you or your staff actually walk into our bank and actually take a paper check and give it to the teller, which is also, very 80s-ish. But, that's also very manual. And so when you put that payment into our bank account, it's blind from our side. So there's a lot of research to figure out, okay, which employer gave this to us? Where does it belong? A lot of phone calls, a lot of time that we're spending processing these, not only on our side, but on your side as well. So again, moving to an electronic format, all of that goes away. Wire payments, still a lot of wires happen. So a wire is an electronic form of payment, but it's not ACH. If you do send wires, the big difference between a wire and an ACH is the wire is just think of a pipeline that just has money in it coming over. There's very little data associated with that. So just like when a direct deposit is made, we come in the morning, we look at our account. If there's $1 million in there, it takes a lot of work to figure out who sent us the $1 million and what's it for. So again, if we use an ACH format, all of that is sort of handled for you. So ACH debit and credit, that's really what the legislation is about. It's just two different flavors of the same thing. So ACH debit, the best way to think about that is you are initiating and scheduling the payment, but we actually pull the transaction through from your bank to our bank. So again, we're pulling that transaction through the system. An ACH credit starts out the same. You're scheduling that, you're approving that, and then instead of us pulling it from your bank account, you push it from your bank account to our bank account. So it's just what you'd prefer. You may have a governance structure or certain policies at your particular employers that govern which one of those you would want to use. From our perspective, that we like them both. Matter of fact, about 1/3 of you in this room are already doing ACH debit, so we appreciate that. Next slide. So just some quick metrics for you, just to give you the size and scope of what's going on in the Treasury unit. We collect about $8.4 billion in contributions, and that comes through in 3,300 transactions. So it's 3,300 different times we're touching and figuring out where this money is coming from and where it belongs. If you look at the pie, about 1/3 of those are already ACH transactions. We do ACH debit, and I actually brought the ACH debit form here today if any of you wanted to sign up. But the remainder of this pie chart right here basically says this is our population of people that we need to actually move from your existing format to ACH. So about 2 out of 3 of you are participating in some other form of payment to CalSTRS. Here's a quick look at the tentative timeline. This is very tentative, but as of right now, we're in the middle of a fact-finding and really information-sharing mode right now with, in venues such as this. We're talking to the employer community through this meeting and others, and we're really soliciting your feedback on this right now to try to learn if there's any pain points that we should be aware of before we actually go to the board and have them sort of make this happen. So, if all the feedback is good, or if there's no major pain points, we'd like to take an action item to our board July 2019, so about 6 months from now, 5 months from now, and from that point would initiate basically the time clock. So from that point, we would want to get everybody onto an ACH format in about 1 year. So that would mean everybody is sending ACH starting July 1, 2020. So again, I did mention that the legislation included a waiver clause if there's any sort of challenges on moving from your current payment format to an ACH format, and we would definitely work with you on that. So please keep that in mind. Next slide here. Yeah, 2020 is our target implementation. I'm going to open it up for any questions right now, but before we get there, I wanted to point out that I brought 2 of our Treasury staff as well. We have them in the meeting as well. Can you wave? So if for any reason this goes into OT and you'd like to talk to us about ACH and what that means, we're here to chat and talk with you. We also brought some feedback forms if you wanted to put something in writing. Anything that you submit to us, we will respond back formally to you. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions. Yes, please. I can hear you.
We have 22 people waiting for this.
Oh, hello, people that are...
So within your
Listen.
presentation, you're talking about just employer contributions. Are you going to move to P&I to be allowed to be ACH?
So yes, right? Yes.
Is there a date on
They would all
same?
They would all be at the same time.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. So my friends in legislation just told me that the P&I piece wouldn't be mandated. Yeah. Thank you, John. Okay, so I would just, last point here is you'll notice we have our own email box. It's epayments@calstrs.com. So if you think of anything that you'd like to formally submit to us about a pain point or just any feedback in general, every single one of those emails will get a response from us. So please use that as a venue to communicate with us. We will be here after the meeting's over, so if you want to talk to us in person as well. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Okay. So on that same theme of e-payments, we, as we announced in November at our last meeting, that we were going to be, CalSTRS was going to be moving towards paperless circulars and directives. And some of the comments that we heard was, some folks aren't on so frequently or regularly and wanted to make sure that they were kept up to date on how and what the content of our circulars and directives were. So we wanted to provide everybody with a timeline of our go-live date. So we will stop mailing circulars and directives effective July 1 of this year. In your packet, you've received a letter that came from Jack on it's dated the 28th of January. In that letter, it lets everyone know that it's a July 1 start date for circulars and directives. And we have a couple of options available for folks who want to sign up online. To the extent that you guys don't have access to SO on a regular basis and supervisors and managers are curious or interested, we've created a couple of different options here. So for now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mailing out as well as emailing. So this is to start testing the system and the process to make sure that folks are getting both the hard copy as well as the soft copy. As you have staff that change or want to be added, that can be managed and maintained on a going forward basis. And on each of the paper notices that go out between now and the 30th of June, we'll also include the notification as a reminder that we're going paperless. Again, where can you find this information and sign up? Here's the landing page for as it relates to SO. And then for folks that, again, don't have regular access to SO, don't want to go through that hassle, through the CalSTRS.com website at the employer landing page, you can sign up for email. So again, this is available for anyone, not just employers. And so by entering your email address, you'll automatically be asked to sign off on the privacy policy, and then from there it will give you numerous options what you want to sign up for, which include, in addition to the employer circulars and directives, it also includes news releases, workshop notifications, and other types of CalSTRS information. So you can select the things that you would like to receive if that list of interest is above and beyond just the employer circulars and directives. That can also be changed and managed at any point going forward. So let's say you want to sign up for everything and CalSTRS is just blowing up your inbox with stuff that is maybe interesting but you're not having time to get to it, you can always go back into your account and change those notifications to limit the information or to really focus the information that CalSTRS is going to be pushing out to you. So again, that's all going to start on July 1st. Any questions? All right. We're moving out of the 80s, David. All right. So I think I actually don't have, I left the copy of the agenda at the table, but now it's open forum. So if there are any other questions or topics that you'd like to discuss, again, we do have folks that are participating remotely, so please let's use the microphone for this part of the conversation. Okay, it's a quiet group today. All right, so our next meeting is scheduled for May 1st. Again, we have a tentative agenda. There'll be as Joycelyn mentioned, there'll be a legislative update as a result of all the pieces of legislation that have been introduced. And then we can add additional items as necessary. And with that, Christine, do you have anything else?
I just, again, wanted to make sure that you are monitoring our announcements for updates to the regulatory process and any questions that you might have. Thank you to all of you who've already met with us to do assessments and follow-ups. And if you haven't yet, please let's get on your calendars so we can make sure we're partnering on that effort. And then to those of you who are waiting to talk to us even today, thank you for staying a little late, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
I wanted to make one.
Wait.
Okay, John's got an announcement, and then I also, come on up, John. I also, sorry about this. I realized when we socialized the calendar for EAC for the calendar year, we had 2 tentative dates, and I wanted to let everyone know that we have now firmed up the dates. So May 1st will be our next meeting. The August meeting will be August 7. The November meeting will be November 13th. Again, those meeting dates are on today's agenda, but again, August 7 and November 13. And then John?
Because someone mentioned that not everybody is on, so I just want to reiterate that if you want to be added to our interested persons list for the regulations, please email us at regulations@calstrs.com. And if you have any of your supervisors or administrators, anybody, just please email us. You'll be added to the list. So we're going to announce it over in March, but also we're going to be sending out that announcement via that list. So regulations@calstrs.com. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we have concluded for today. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing everybody in May.